Vipul, do you want to read?
Yes.
1 second, I'll just. Yeah. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Jai Baba,
The
please.
seven realities. Jai Baba. Existence, love, sacrifice, renunciation, knowledge, control, and surrender. I give no importance to creed, dogma, caste, or the performance of religious ceremonies and rites, but to the understanding of the following seven realities. Number one, the only real existence is that of one and only God, who is the self in every finite self. Number two, the only real love is the love for this infinity, that is God, which arouses an intense longing to see, know, and become one with its truth, that is God. Point number three, the only real sacrifice is that in which, in pursuance of this love, all things body, mind, position, welfare, and even life itself are sacrificed. Number four, the only real renunciation is that which abandons, even in the midst of worldly duties, all selfish thoughts and desires. Number five, the only real knowledge is the knowledge that God is the inner dweller in good people and in so called bad, in saint and in so called sinner. This knowledge requires you to help all equally as circumstances demand, without expectation of reward. When compelled to take part in a dispute, to act without the slightest trace of enmity or hatred, to try to make others happy with brotherly or sisterly feeling for each other, each one, and to harm no one in thought, word, or deed, not even those who harm you. Next page, yeah, six. The only real control is the discipline of senses to abstain from indulgences in low desires, which alone ensures absolute purity of character. 7. The only real surrender is that in which poise is undisturbed by any adverse circumstance, and the individual, amidst every kind of hardship, is resigned with perfect calm to the will of God. Thank you, Jai Baba.
Avatar Meher Baba ki jai. Thank you. So let's get started from where we left off. Oops.
Page 41, 42.
Okay. I think I messed it up by trying to do what I did yesterday. 1 second. Okay, maybe I've killed it. Yeah, I have to just restart Adobe. Yeah. Okay. What page number did you say, please?
41, 42. Actually 42, but we can start from the 5 ways of
Oops, sorry.
securing release from sanskaras.
Again, okay.
40. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, let's start with the 5 headings again. So that's a good idea. So I'm on page 41. The release from sanskaras takes place in the following 5 ways. Number 1, the cessation of creating new sanskaras. This consists in putting an end to the ever-renewing activity of creating fresh sanskaras. If the formation of sanskaras is compared to the winding of a string around a stick, this step amounts to the cessation of further winding of the string. Second, the wearing out of old sanskaras. If sanskaras are withheld from expressing themselves in action and experience, they are gradually worn out. In the analogy of the string, the process is comparable to the wearing out of the string at the place where it is. Number 3, unwinding of past samskaras. This process consists in annulling past sanskaras by mentally reversing the process that leads to their formation. Continuing our analogy, it is like unwinding the string. The dispersion, number 4, is the dispersion and exhaustion of some samskaras. If the mental energy that is locked up in sanskaras is sublimated and diverted into other channels, they are dispersed and exhausted and tend to disappear. Finally, the wiping out of sanskaras. This consists in completely annihilating the sanskaras. In the analogy of the string, this is comparable to cutting the string with a pair of scissors. The final wiping out of sanskaras can be effected only by the grace of a perfect master. It should be carefully noted that many of the concrete methods of undoing sanskaras are found to be effective in more than one way, and the 5 ways mentioned above are not meant to classify these methods into sharply distinguished types. They represent rather the different principles characterizing the spiritual processes that take place while sanskaras are being removed. For the sake of convenience, this part will deal only with those methods that preeminently illustrate the first 3 principles, namely cessation of creating fresh sanskaras and the wearing out and unwinding of past sanskaras. The methods that predominantly illustrate the last 2 principles, the dispersion and exhaustion through sublimation of sanskaras and the wiping out of sanskaras, will be explained in parts 2 and 3. Okay, we continue. The subtitle is Renunciation. If the mind is to be freed from the bondage of ever accumulating samskaras, it is necessary that there should be an end to the creation of new sanskaras. Fresh multiplication of sanskaras can be stopped through renunciation. Renunciation may be external or internal. External or physical renunciation consists in giving up everything to which the mind is attached. Home, parents, marriage, children, friends, wealth, comforts, and gross enjoyments. Internal or mental renunciation consists in giving up all cravings, particularly the craving for sensual objects. Through external renunciation in itself, though external renunciation in itself is not necessarily accompanied by internal renunciation, it often paves a way for internal renunciation. Spiritual freedom consists in internal renunciation and not in external renunciation. But external renunciation is a great aid in achieving internal renunciation. The person who renounces his possessions disconnects himself from everything that he had or has. This means that the things he renounces are no longer a source of fresh sanskaras. He thus takes an important step towards emancipating himself from his sanskaras by putting an end to the process of forming new sanskaras. This is not all that is achieved through external renunciation. With the renouncing of everything, he also renounces his past bindings. The old sanskaras connected with his possessions get detached from his mind. And since they are withheld from expressing themselves, they get worn out. I'll pause here if there is any questions. But basically, first point is he's classifying renunciation into two, external and internal. And then he describes what each of them is. And yeah, I think
Yeah,
any,
Karthik, I just want to
yeah,
add. So basically, renunciation of external sanskaras is like a precondition to go inwards, and you can say it's sort of a precondition uh, to on the path. Can we put
yeah,
it that way?
yes, I think, and it's also practical, and we are used to it already in the sense that if you look at any path, any master, any religion, the approach is always with some sort of approach starts with some sort of external renunciation anyway, right? You become a monk, you let go of certain things, and so on and so forth, right? So I think we can relate to that, but then Baba explains the logic clearly here.
No, you're right. As you said, in many religions, they say you give up one particular food, maybe sweet or something, or a fruit. So it starts with some sort of renunciation or giving up.
True. Okay, if we have no other points, I'll continue. For
No, I have
most
just one.
person,
Sorry, and just one
yeah, go
other
ahead.
point is that this 1, 2, 3. They say what the steps for removing sanskaras. Um I wish we could link it with the practical the practical ways of doing it. So like we had meditation, we have yoga, and Kama usually talks about vipassana. So is there some way of linking one to one, or at least some correlation between this removal of sanskaras with the practical tools available?
Good comment. Shall we save that for till we finish
Later,
this chapter?
for later, yes, for later. But I just,
I'll remember if I don't, remind me again, and we'll ask Kama and also anybody who can comment on that. That's a good idea.
yes, thank you, Jai Baba. Jai Baba.
Yeah, Baba. I'll continue. Any other points or no? So for most persons, external renunciation creates a favorable atmosphere for the wearing out of sanskaras. An individual who possesses wealth and power is exposed to a life of indulgence and extravagance. His circumstances are more favorable for temptations. Man is mostly what he becomes by being chopped, chiseled, and shaped by the sculptor of environment. Whether or not he can surmount his surroundings depends upon his strength of character. If he is strong, he remains free in his thought and action. Even in the midst of action and reaction with his environment, if he, if he is strong, he remains free in his thought and action, even in the midst of action and reaction with his environment. If he is weak, he succumbs to its influence. Even if he is strong, he is likely to be swept off his feet by a powerful wave of the collective mode of life and thought. It is difficult to withstand the onslaught of a current of ideas and avoid falling prey to circumstances. If he resists the circumstances, he is likely to be carried away by some wild wave of collective passion and get caught up in modes of thought that he is unable to renounce. Though it is difficult to resist and overcome these influences and surroundings, it is easier to escape from them. Many persons would like a chaste and straightforward life if they were not surrounded by luxuries and temptations. The renunciation of all superfluous things helps the wearing out of sanskaras and is therefore contributory to the life of freedom. So I have one question here. So I didn't understand how is it easier? So though it is difficult to resist and overcome these influences and surroundings, it is easier to escape from them. So it's
Yeah, that is what is getting physically away from those things, no? Physical renunciation.
so physical
Getting
renunciation
away.
makes it
Escape from.
easier.
Yeah.
Makes it easier to resist
Yes.
and escape from those
Yeah.
allurances.
It's a very, I think, yeah, very, very important point. It is very easy, but the mental renunciation is the most difficult part, actually.
Correct.
So, as we say, that people are honest because they don't get opportunity to be corrupt. So,
Yes.
it's like that, you know. Yeah.
Good point. Solitude and fasting. The two important forms of external renunciation that have special spiritual value are solitude and fasting. Withdrawal of oneself from the storm and stress of the multifarious worldly activities and occasional retirement into solitude are valuable for wearing out the sanskaras connected with the gregarious instinct. But this is not to be looked upon as a goal in itself. Like solitude, fasting also has great spiritual value. Eating is satisfaction, fasting is denial. Fasting is physical when food is not taken in spite of the craving for the enjoyment of eating. It is mental when food is taken not for its delights and attachments, but merely for the survival of the body. External fasting consists in avoiding direct contact with food in order to achieve mental fasting. Food is a direct necessity of life, and its continued denial is bound to be disastrous to health. Before I continue, I think I'll just make this point. So, this is an important, at least from semantics. So, he's distinguishing fasting as physical and mental. So, fasting is physical when food is not taken in spite of the craving for the enjoyment of eating. It is mental when food is taken not for its delights and attachments, but merely for the survival of the body. Right? So, external fasting consists in avoiding direct contact with food in order to achieve mental fasting. So, the end goal is to go towards mental fasting, where food is only to make the body survive. Good point. I continue. Food is a direct necessity of life, and its continued denial is bound to be disastrous to health. Therefore, external fasting should be periodical and only for a short time. It has to be continued till there is complete victory over the craving for food. By bringing into action the vital forces to withstand the craving for food, it is possible to free the mind from attachment to food. External fasting has no spiritual value when it is undertaken with the motive of securing the health of the body or for the sake of self demonstration. It should not be used as an instrument for self assertion. In the same way, it should not be carried to the extreme, that is, until the body is reduced to its limits. Self mortification through prolonged fasting does not necessarily promote freedom from the craving for food. On the contrary, it is likely to invite a subsequent reaction toward a life of extravagant indulgence in food. If, however, external fasting is undertaken in moderation and for spiritual purposes, it facilitates the achievement of internal fasting. When external and internal fasting are wholehearted and faithful, they bring about the unwinding of the sanskaras connected with the craving for food. So there are two contrasts that are brought out. One is external and internal, and then the physical and the mental. Right. So let's
also the fasting, as we say, ultimately leads to even eating more, as we see in some of the fasts that we keep, that people, as soon as they break the fast, they eat like hogs. No? Even in the the iftar parties that we
Iftar,
that has
yes.
become a party actually. It's a star is eating a food during one food in a day, but it has become a party and becomes it's like enjoying food to that sense.
A very good example, because I was discussing this with somebody, and what probably started as a very good spiritual practice of the
Yes.
month of fasting.
Yes.
I have heard of people who actually indulge more in that month,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
They end up
Yes.
adding a few pounds to their weight at the end of the month, because it's all rich food and then frequent partying, like you said. So exactly what is
Uh,
mentioned here.
yes, what is actually the general concept of, say, fasting and food habits do not have a background of spirituality at all
Spiritual.
in the general concept. So it is, we are concentrating more on the gross body, its conditioning, and our capabilities of activity and all that. So here actually fasting is related to spiritual aspect. So related to unwinding of sanskaras and all that. So this, if we imbibe this concept properly, these points are going to help us.
Absolutely.
Mamaji,
Good point.
I would believe that the fasting, religious fasting, has a spiritual significance, but people do not. Maybe it's not done just for the health. The Ekadashi fast and the fast during the Ramadan and during the Lent and other periods. The fast that the giants keep actually. So, but yes, most people
I
it is
was
just goes as a
more
ritual.
expressing towards the modern concept of say different types of food taking in different say
Yeah.
quotients,
Going
and
after
then
me.
all that is yes, all
The
that
app
is
based.
related to body
Yeah.
as such.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because I never fasted throughout my life. I only started fasting when I was trying to correct my diabetes, and it helped. But now I getting to know the benefit, which is our spiritual. So once in a while I do fast. But I mean, it's not exclusively for health, but also both the reasons actually. So it's,
So
it's like
there
that.
is one sentence here. External fasting has no spiritual value when it is undertaken with the motive of securing the
Yes,
health of the
yes,
body or
yes.
for the sake of self demonstration. So it also adds
Yeah.
to negativity in the spiritual field also.
So
But it helped
ego.
me
Yes.
learn.
Yes,
Mamaji, it
yes.
helped me learn fasting actually. I never fasted. I am 54. The last 2 years only I started. So, but I started with my motive of health, but it actually, at least I could believe that I could fast, and then I started doing otherwise too. Yeah. Jai Baba.
Mamaji, just want to add, what you said is very true. Many people do the fasting and then they make a big show of it. I
Yeah,
fasted for
Mm.
7 days and 7 nights, and then they make a sort of a celebration of that. So I think we have to
yes.
just do it silently and without
Yeah.
any self demonstration. That's a very good point, because especially as Sanjay pointed out, in the Jain community, they do a lot of you know propaganda, which should be avoided, I think. Yes.
Yes.
I think there's also something, I think in the Jain community, I'm not sure. There is also what Baba refers to as self-mortification through prolonged fasting, right?
Yes, yes.
That is there.
Yeah.
Yes, that is known as
Yeah.
Yeah.
that is known
They
as
do it.
the Sanskrit word is santhara. That means
Ah,
Yes.
you will not eat anything or drink anything till your last breath.
correct. That's what. Yeah.
Yeah.
So he is not, he's critical, but he is not dismissive. So he says, does not necessarily promote freedom from the craving for food. So on the contrary, it's likely to invite a subsequent reaction of life of extravagant indulgence. Anyway, good discussion. Any other points, or we can continue to penance? Okay, penance. The unwinding of many other sanskaras can be brought about through penance. This consists in augmenting and expressing the feeling of remorse an individual feels after realizing that he has done some wrongful act. Repentance consists in mentally reviving the wrongs with severe self condemnation. It is facilitated by availing oneself of the different circumstances and situations that stir up penance, or by remaining vulnerable during periods of emotional outbursts, or by deliberate efforts to recall the past incidents with a remorseful heart and acute disapproval. Such penance unwinds the sanskaras that are responsible for the action. Self condemnation, accompanied by deep feeling, can negate the sanskaras of anger, greed, and lust. Suppose a person has done irreparable wrong to someone through uncontrolled greed, anger, or lust. Sometime or other, he is bound to have the reaction of self killing remorse and experience the pricks of conscience. If at this time he vividly realizes the evil for which he was responsible, the intensity of emotional awareness by which it is accompanied consumes the tendencies for which he stands self condemned. Self condemnation sometimes expresses itself through different forms of self mortification. Some aspirants even inflict wounds on their body when they are in a mood of penitence. But such drastic expression of remorse must be discouraged as a general usage. Some Hindu aspirants try to cultivate humility by making it a rule to fall at the feet of everyone whom they meet. To those of strong will and stable character, penance can bring the desired good effect through self humiliation, which unwinds and eradicates the different sanskaras connected with good and bad actions. Others, who might be feeble in their willpower, also derive benefit from penance if they are under sympathetic and loving direction. If they are under sympathetic and loving direction. When penance is carefully nourished and practiced, it inevitably results in the mental revocation of undesirable modes of thought and conduct and makes one amenable to a life of purity and service. It should, however, be carefully noted that there is always the danger in penance that the mind might dwell too long upon the wrongs done and thus develop the morbid habit of wailing and weeping over petty things. Such sentimental extravagance is often an indiscriminate waste of energy and is in no way helpful in the wearing out of the unwinding of sanskaras. Penance should not be like the everyday repentance that follows everyday weaknesses. It should not become a tedious and sterile habit of immoderate and gloomy pondering over one's own failings. Sincere penance does not consist in perpetuating grief for the wrongs, but in resolving to avoid in the future those deeds that call forth remorse. If it leads to lack of self-respect or self-confidence, it has not served its true purpose, which is merely to render impossible the repetition of certain types of action. I think the goal is clearly set here. So if it leads to lack of self-respect or self-confidence, it has not served its true purpose. So the true purpose is merely to render impossible the repetition of certain types of action. So that's the end goal.
I think you can add one more sentence to that, what you are telling. That is the last sentence in the previous paragraph. When penance is carefully nourished and practiced, it inevitably results in the mental revocation of undesirable modes of thought and conduct and makes one amenable to a life of purity and service.
Correct.
Yeah.
So modes of thought and conduct, so action and thought and makes one amenable to a life of purity and service. Agreed.
Yeah, the another important point that Baba is trying to make is it's not just over crying over it, and self condemnation that is to be avoided. Actually, you have to think it over properly, not to do it again, and ask for forgiveness. That's Baba has given the repentance prayer, but do not keep and believe that Baba has pardoned you and move on from there. Actually, on a practical sense that I'm saying, rather than just keep brooding over it all over, all the time.
Correct. No, but
Yeah.
I think we should read that in the context of what he has said here. So
Yeah.
penance should not be like the everyday repentance that follows
Yes.
everyday
Yeah.
weaknesses. So
Yes.
Everyday
Yes.
uh,
Yes.
weakness.
Yes. Yes.
yes, so
It
it
has to
has to be
be
deeper than
honestly
that.
done.
Yes, it has to be deeper than that. And I
Yes.
think the our sight should be clearly on the end state, which is render impossible the repetition of certain types of action. So we have to
Yeah.
keep that goal, keep our self-respect and
Yes.
self-confidence
Yes.
intact,
Yes. Yes.
and deeply think about penance.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Then we reach the goal.
So what is done, and then move on.
Yes, yes,
Yeah. It's very, very important actually.
yes, yes. Okay. Denying desires their fulfillment. That's the next subtitle. The wearing out and unwinding of sanskaras can also be effected by denying to desires their expression and fulfillment. People differ in their capacity and aptitude for rejecting desires. Those in whom desires arise with great impulsive velocity are unable to curb them at their source, but they can refrain from seeking their fulfillment through action. Even if someone has no control over the surging of desires, he can prevent them from being translated into action. Rejection of desires by controlling actions avoids the possibility of sowing seeds of future desires. On the other hand, if uh, on the other hand, if a person translates his desire into action, he may spend up and exhaust some impressions, but he's creating fresh impressions during the very process of fulfilling the desires, and is thus sowing seeds for future desires, which in their turn are bound to demand their own satisfaction. The process of spending up or exhausting impressions through expression and fulfillment does not in itself contribute towards securing release from sanskaras. When desires
I love
arise,
that sentence. One sentence was very beautiful. Yeah. The
yeah,
sowing seeds for future desires, which in their turn are
are
bound to
bound to
demand their own
demand their own
satisfaction. They will demand their satisfaction when their turn
yeah,
comes.
yes,
That's very good. Yeah. Jai Baba. Sorry.
yeah, there are. So yeah, when desires arise and their release into action is barred, there is plenty of opportunity for spontaneous cogitation about these desires. This cogitation results in the wearing out of corresponding sanskaras. It should be noted, however, that such spontaneous cogitation does not bring about the desired result if it takes the form of mental indulgence in the desires. When there is a deliberate and wanton attempt to welcome and harbor the desires in the mind, such cogitation will not only have no spiritual value, but may itself be responsible for creating subtle sanskaras. Cogitation should not be accompanied by any conscious sanction for the desires that arise in consciousness, and there should not be any effort to perpetuate the memory of these desires. When desires are denied their expression and fulfillment in action and are allowed to pass through the intensity of the fire of a cogitative consciousness that does not sanction them, the seeds of these desires are consumed. The rejection of desires and the inhibition of physical response effect in time an automatic and natural negation of the past sanskaras. So both of them together, the rejection and the inhibition of physical response, affect in time, automatic and natural negation of past sanskaras.
Can we read this
In the
paragraph again,
yes,
Karthik?
Sure,
yes.
sure.
Please, yeah.
Yeah. So he's talking largely about a new word. Like if we want, we can even look it up. I think it is thinking, but let's just remove
Just
all
looked it up.
doubt. I'm just looking it up.
I just read it from the dictionary. It says meditate, think deeply.
Yeah. Concerted thought or reflection, meditation, contemplation. Right? So that's cogito ergo sum, Latin.
I think you can read the whole paragraph, whole
I will.
section once again.
Whole section. Okay. So we'll start from denying desires their fulfillment. I'll start from here.
Yes.
The wearing out, the wearing out and the unwinding of sanskaras can also be effected by denying to desires their expression and fulfillment. People differ in their capacity and aptitude for rejecting desires. Those in whom desires arise with great impulsive velocity are unable to curb them at their source, but they can refrain from seeking their fulfillment through action. Even if someone has no control over the surging of desires, he can prevent them from being translated into action. Rejection of desires by controlling actions avoids the possibility of sowing seeds of future desires.
So in this paragraph, there is one way, that is the desire comes in your mental sphere, but you don't get into the action. That is one way of trying to avoid the desires. That is what is explained here.
In the first para, yes.
Yes, yes.
On the other hand, if a person translates his desires into action, he may spend up and exhaust some impressions, but he is creating fresh impressions. Yeah.
Yes, yes. This is very important, I feel. So trying to avoid action may not help. Doing the action also can help. That is what he is trying to tell here.
Yeah. On the other hand, if a person translates his desires into action, he may spend up and exhaust some impressions, but he is creating fresh impressions during the very process of fulfilling the desires and is thus sowing seeds for future desires, which in their turn are bound to demand their own satisfaction. So the first line has to be seen with the second line in mind.
Yes, yes.
So it does exhaust some impression, but then it comes back with spring effect. You are creating new sanskaras and desires, and those desires at their right time will demand greater action.
Yes.
Right. So
your action should be in such a way that you don't add up new sanskaras.
That you're going
is
to out of
intelligent
syllabus,
action.
intelligent action, out of syllabus
Okay,
right now.
okay.
Yeah.
But
The process.
I just wanted to add that they say that you create weak sanskaras in your thoughts. So I think to kill the thoughts at that point and not convert it into action is the one possible strategy.
That is already explained in the first paragraph.
No doubt. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
The process of spending up or exhausting impressions through expression and fulfillment does not in itself contribute towards securing release from samskaras. So that's the summary. So he starts with the line that you can spend it, but then summarizes, but that you cannot secure release. Then we go to the cogitation, the thinking, indulging in that, in a thought, indulging the desire with more thought fuel, right? I'll continue. When desires arise and their release into action is barred, there is plenty of opportunity for spontaneous cogitation about these desires. This cogitation results in the wearing out of the corresponding sanskaras. It should be noted, however, that such spontaneous cogitation does not bring about the desired result if it takes the form of mental indulgence in the desires. When there is a deliberate and
Can
wanton,
I stop it here?
yeah,
So this is probably what happens in Vipassana. So there they observe what is the thought process in your mind and then try to analyze and try to look at it. Do not act, do not say go further with it, but keep being aware of that, try to think on those lines. That may be the part of Vipassana. I don't know. Kama has to give a clarity on that. Hey, Baba.
yep, Kama, any inputs contrasting what Baba is saying here to Vipassana? Any confirmation of what he's on the call, right? Talking on mute. Oh, he's not even on the call. Okay, he's not on the call. All right, so we'll continue. We'll check that up the line. So when there is a deliberate and wanton attempt to welcome and harbor the desires in the mind, such cogitation will not only have no spiritual value, but may itself be responsible for creating subtle sanskaras. Cogitation should not be accompanied by any conscious sanction for the desires that arise in consciousness, and there should not be any effort to perpetuate the memory of these desires. Right?
Yeah. Actually, I think here one point that comes to my mind is in common parlance of the modern times, people think, ये सोचने में क्या जाता है, you know? We say in a loose language, ये हमने किया तो नहीं है, but सोचने में क्या जाता है, no? Just thinking it doesn't makes, it's not wrong. People, you know, common parlance, they say. So here it is giving that answer that even thinking and indulging on those desires, not even acting, is also creating sanskaras.
Yeah.
Say with that, you can also link it up that all sanskaras are stored in the mental area.
Yeah, another confirmation that mental body is the one that holds the sanskaras. Yeah.
So sochne mein it stays there.
So I continue. When desires are denied their expression and fulfillment in action and are allowed to pass through the intensity of the fire of a cogitative consciousness that does not sanction them, the seeds of these desires are consumed. So the key word here is the cogitative consciousness that does not sanction them, then the seeds of these desires are consumed. The rejection of desires and the inhibition of the physical response effect in time, automatic and natural negation of the past sanskaras. So this is the final summary, right? For the rejection of desires, first one, and the inhibition of physical response, effect in time, and automatic and natural negation of the past sanskaras. Khalid, any points, anything to be discussed?
No, this is wonderful, very beautiful. Only this line, this combination, the cogitation results in the wearing out of the corresponding sanskaras. I'm just trying to figure that out. In the third paragraph, when desires arise, this third line, this
cogitation results in the wearing out of the corresponding sanskaras.
Corresponding sanskaras, yeah. Yes.
So I think the sanskaras linked to the desire that sprang, right?
Yeah. So one the desire is by itself not in solitude. From one desires there is a what you call a linkage. There is a chain to other corresponding desires. That's what Baba is trying to say here, I presume.
I think so too. Yeah.
This cogitation results in the wearing out of the corresponding sanskaras.
Correct.
It should be noted that the such spontaneous cogitation does not bring about the desired results if it takes the form of mental indulgence and desires. Okay. Thanks, Karthik.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so desirelessness, we continue. Rejection of desires is a preparation for desirelessness, or the state of non-wanting, which alone can bring about true freedom. Wanting is necessarily binding, whether it is fulfilled or not. When it is fulfilled, it leads to further wanting and thus perpetuates the bondage of the spirit. When it is unfulfilled, it leads to disappointment and suffering, which through their sanskaras fetter the freedom of the spirit in their own way. So the problem when desire becomes to want, and it can either be fulfilled or not fulfilled. When it is unfulfilled, it leads to disappointment and suffering. When it is fulfilled, it leads to further wanting and thus perpetuates the bondage of the spirit.
So, Karthik, I just wanted to add here, maybe this is one of the paths towards Manonash. So you just have to kill the desires.
Yes.
Yeah, this probably explains the line we were just discussing, previously. This cogitation results in the wearing out of the corresponding sanskaras. I think Baba here answers that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah, I'll continue. There's no end of wanting. There's no end to wanting because the external and internal stimuli of the mind are constantly alluring it into a state of wanting or disliking, which is another form of wanting something. The external stimuli are the sensations of sight, hearing, smell, taste, and touch. The internal stimuli are those that arise in the mind of man from the memories of the present life and the totality of sanskaras gathered by consciousness during the evolutionary period and during human lives. When the mind is trained to remain unmoved and balanced in the presence of all external and internal stimuli, it arises at the state of non-wanting. And by non-wanting, and by not wanting anything except the absolute reality, which is beyond the opposites of stimuli, it is possible to unwind the sanskaras of wanting. Okay. Poise of non-wanting and the principle of
Karthik,
neti. Yeah.
Karthik, one sentence is very expressive. The internal stimuli are those that arise in the mind of man from the memories of the present life and the totality of sanskaras gathered by consciousness during evolutionary period and during human lives. So this is the totality.
Yes, yes.
That is a
Yes,
very
yes.
interesting thing. So it is a
Yeah,
grand sum of all these
Huge.
things.
Yes.
yes.
Yeah.
And the modern spin doctors say, these are only natural, so don't be shy of them. Especially towards the left. Yeah. This is different. Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think we can continue. Again, the word poise comes back. So, poise of non-wanting and principle of neti. Wanting is a state of disturbed equilibrium of mind, and non-wanting is a state of stable poise. The poise of non-wanting can only be maintained by an unceasing disentanglement from all stimuli, whether pleasant or painful, agreeable or disagreeable. In order to remain unmoved by the joys and sorrows of this world, the mind must be completely detached from the external and internal stimuli. Though the mind is constantly fortifying itself through its own constructive suggestions, there is always the chance of these outposts of defense being washed away by some sudden and unexpected wave arising in the ocean of the natural and mental environment. When this happens, you may, for a time, feel completely lost, but the attitude of non-attachment can keep you safe. This attitude consists in the application of the principle of neti neti, not this, not this. It implies constant effort to maintain a watchful detachment in relation to the alluring opposites of limited experience. It is not possible to deny only the disagreeable stimuli and remain inwardly attached to the agreeable stimuli. If the mind is to remain unmoved by the onslaughts of the opposites, it cannot continue to be attached to the expressions of agreeable stimuli and be influenced by them. The equipoise consists in meeting both alternatives with complete detachment. Negative element in all aspects of asceticism. The yes meaning of the positive sanskaras can only be annulled through the negative assertion of no. This negative element is necessarily present in all aspects of asceticism as expressed through renunciation, solitude, fasting, penance, withholding desires from fulfillment, and non-wanting. The happy blending of all these methods and attitudes creates a healthy form of asceticism in which there is no toil or exertion. But to ensure all this, the negative element in them must come naturally without giving rise to any perversions or further limitations. So the types of negation are clearly mentioned here. So we will mark that up.
Absolutely, that's very
What's
important.
that?
It's very important.
Yes. Yeah. So, any questions or doubts on the neti neti? So it's basically detachment from stimuli, but detachment from both stimuli, agreeable and disagreeable, right? So, and that's a conscious effort to move in that direction. I'll continue. Trying to coerce.
Regarding the neti thing, actually in the Hindu philosophy, it is more taken as a pointer towards God, not
Correct.
this. When you are searching for God, you have some vision coming up. You say that is not God. Drop it and then go further and look for something else, and that also you drop. So the end is realization of God. So here actually this neti is taken in the say grab of sanskaras also. So as we grow up in the path, we need to give up sanskaras or become free of sanskaras. For that also we can adopt this. That's what Baba is pointing it out here, I think.
Yeah.
Jai
Correct.
Baba.
Very right, Mamaji. In the Madhusudan Arti, where it says the first line, Neti Neti, Jahan Kalpana Shabda na Paunche. So there Neti Neti is in the context of the first one, as per the, what you said. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, Baba. Yes. Neti Neti
Yes.
Ved Pukare. Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
So it's a philosophical way of negation to reach the ultimate truth. So you keep, not negation, the word is elimination to reach what remains, which is God. So you keep eliminating all other options and say, this is not it, this is not it, this is not it, till you are left only with God.
Yeah, it's like digging a diamond in a hillock, you know. Just keep removing the earth, and then you ultimately find.
Yes,
It's like that.
correct.
Yeah.
Another important takeaway is equipoise, not getting moved by either negative or positive situations. I think that's coming out again and again. Not to get uh,
Reality number 7.
Yes.
yes,
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, this line here on the last paragraph, which we just read, the happy blending of all these methods and attitudes creates a healthy form of asceticism in which there is no toil for exertion.
Yeah.
But, there's a flip side. But to ensure all this, the negative elements in them must come naturally without giving rise to any perversion or further limitation. What is Baba trying to say here?
If I want to give an example, raw example, there are a lot of different religious practices where they take unnatural methods of becoming totally away from the society, thinking that that will purify them or things like that. That is going to give them a lot of more samskaras in a different way. So that is not going to achieve. Say here I can put in a lot of say feelings like this Nagas, how they practice, and there are so many other hard fact, very say obnoxious ways of doing spiritual work. So that may not help. That may bind them with a lot more sanskaras than make them free of all these things. Maybe that is what is alluded here also.
Yeah, I also think so. Even bodily harms they do actually to themselves.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, that's also there. Yeah.
I think, but both of them are fine. I mean, all of us agree that each thought or each action or each word creates further samskaras, right? So
Yeah.
whatever we do it, we have to do, even in this concept of negative negation, it has to be done with the cognitive clarity that it should not create further samskaras. So it's
Yeah.
easier said than done, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and he is also saying happy blending of all this. There's not been just
Yes.
one method cannot give you, you know. You have to
Yes,
Yes.
have all of them. The penance, you cannot have just solitude and no penance actually. You have to have,
correct,
all that mixed up. Yeah.
correct, absolutely.
Yes. Yes.
Different different strokes for different folks.
Yeah.
Yeah. Trying to coerce the mind to a life of asceticism is of no use. Any forcible adjustment of life on ascetic lines is likely to stunt the growth of some good qualities. When the healthy qualities of human nature are allowed to develop naturally and slowly, they unfold the knowledge of relative values and thereby pave the way for a spontaneous life of asceticism. Whereas any attempt to force or hasten the mind towards an ascetic life is likely to invite reaction. So, again, forced asceticism may not work. The process of being freed from some attachments is often accompanied by the process of forming some other new attachments. The grossest form of attachment is that which is directed toward the world of objects. But when the mind is being detached from the world of objects, it has a tendency to arrive at some finer attachments of a subjective kind. After the mind has succeeded in cultivating a certain degree of detachment, it might easily develop that subtle form of egotism, which expresses itself through aloofness and a superior air. Detachment should not be allowed to form any nucleus upon which the ego could fasten itself, and at the same time, it should not be an expression of one's inability to cope with the storm and stress of worldly life. 2 points here. Detachment should not be allowed to breed ego. Second, it should not be a form of escape. Right? And at the same time, it should not be an expression of one's inability to cope with the storm and stress of worldly life.
Karthik, I have a question that's subjective kind. Can somebody throw some light or elaborate or
Objective?
analogy? This second line, the grossest form of attachment is that in which
World of objects?
yes. One second. Then the next, it has a tendency to arrive at some final attachments of a subjective kind.
Here, okay. Anybody?
This objective and subjective, we have already seen earlier. Objective refers more to the grosser aspects of this, to the grosser sphere or gross world or things like that. Subjective is, so the subjective refers to the subtle or the mental or the in-core of the actual soul. So it is not influenced by anything external, but it is internal. So that is more subjective. So that is more concentration of the ego. If it is done negatively, you are going to increase your ego and then become non-helpful in the spiritual path. So it should be a egoless, subjective growth that I look that as the spiritual thing. Hope I did not confuse anyone.
No, thank you, Mamaji. Thank you.
Yeah. The things that limit pure and infinite being should be given up through an attitude of immense strength, which is born of purity and enlightenment, and not from a sense of helplessness in the face of strife and struggle. Further, true detachment does not consist in clinging to the mere formula of neti neti, which sometimes becomes an obsession of the mind without any deep-felt longing for enlightenment. Such interest in a mere formula of negation often exists side by side with an inward dwelling on the temptations. Detachment can be integral and wholehearted only when it becomes an inseparable part of one's nature. Negative sanskaras must also disappear before enlightenment. The negative assertion of no, no is the only way of unwinding the positive sanskaras gathered through evolution and human lives. Although this process does destroy the positive sanskaras, it results in the formation of the negative sanskaras, which in their own way condition the mind and create a new problem. The assertion of no, no has to be sufficiently powerful to effect the eradication of all the physical, subtle, and mental sanskaras. But after it has served its purpose, it has to be ultimately abandoned. The finality of spiritual experience does not consist of bare negation. To bring it under a negative formula is to limit it by means of an intellectual. It must be renounced before the ultimate goal of life can be attained. Hello? Am I audible?
In between, we lost you. In between.
We lost you in between.
Yeah. I just got a notification. I realized there's something wrong. Now I'm audible, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I'll read the last two lines again. The finality of spiritual experience does not consist of bare negation. To bring it under a negative formula is to limit it by means of an intellectual concept. The negative formula has to be used by the mind to decondition itself. but it must be renounced before the ultimate goal of life can be attained. So how does one do it? I do not know. Maybe we read further and then decide.
Just hold on, Karthik. If you
Yeah.
can go up a little.
Yeah.
Just here. Although this process does destroy positive sanskaras,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the negative assertion of no, I couldn't understand this, is the only way of unwinding positive sanskaras gathered through evolution and human lives. Although this process does destroy positive sanskaras, it is the formation of negative sanskaras. I couldn't understand this, although, and further. Can someone explain, please?
Anybody? Kama is back.
Kama is back, is that? Okay.
Yeah, I see him.
Yes, Kama, can you come in?
So, yeah, Jai Baba. Sorry, I know I went for a walk with a guest actually, so there was no network, but I'm back. Can you repeat the question, please?
So the question is,
which is
how does the negative assertion of no unwind positive sanskaras, but it also creates negative sanskaras?
Well, again, yes and no are basically still in the domain of duality,
Duality.
right? So I think in that perspective, you're just putting debit into credit and credit into debit. So I think that's how you can interpret that particular aspect. Because one has to go beyond, So first, I think you neutralize the effect, and then after that, you go beyond that. So when you have done a bad thing, you have to balance that with an equally good thing. So you're balancing there, but then you have to go beyond this, balancing act. So that is how I would interpret that. I don't know whether I'm making myself clear on this. It's a very contextual thing. This particular thing needs to be looked from certain case study examples. So right now, I'm not able to think of anything, but I will make a note of this and try to. I think it is a very contextual aspect based on certain situations. So we have to find out what kind of examples will relate to this particular aspect.
Yes.
Yeah, Mama,
And
you
I
were
think
saying something. Sorry.
So this can be taken in so many different ways. So actually, the concept of say Papa Punya, the concept of heaven and hell, all can be taken here. So if you go to heaven, you come back to the world and then experience. As for Baba, you will experience the negative aspects. You had the positive in one experience, so you will have to experience the opposite of that. And so you have to go beyond this, both these positives and negatives. So that's why saying no to everything, that is one way of doing say asceticism. So actually I give up everything. So that may attract a lot of craving in your mind for a positive require. I want this want will remain in your mind. If you cannot root it out and say just on the face that no to certain things, that is going to create a sort of a vicious cycle. So this saying no or yes to anything has to be to the extent of balancing things, so that this is not a reaction, this is just a response, so that the sanskaras building up stops there. That's how we have to look at it, I think. Jai Baba.
Yeah, I think broadly I agree with you, but contextually, I think the reference is the approach of negation creates negative sanskaras, right? It unwinds the positive sanskara, but then creates a negative sanskara, which I'm still struggling to understand. and more importantly, how do you eliminate negative samskaras, which he describes in the next paragraph? So I think this surely needs some more thinking and coming back. So Kama, we look forward to your case study example and any more thoughts from anybody else.
Yeah, Jai Baba. Karthik, I think
Yeah.
I just thought of an example. I don't know whether it makes sense, but let me tell you, it's so personal.
Sure.
When I was doing my engineering degree, I was very much reading all the spiritual texts, and I said, like, okay, if the goal is God realization, why go through the rat race? So I had decided to join the Ramakrishna Mission monk. Okay, everything was formalized. The monks were waiting, blah blah. And in the last minute, something happened to me, and I had this insight that I was running away from society. Number two was, I was escaping, and third, I'm going to disappoint my parents, and because of that, my parents, who are influenced by the community, will get affected by my, decision, because the community will say, like, something was wrong with the parents that made him go take this decision. Okay, so in a way, the what I would call it is that the decision, the goal for God realization, we know is the only real goal. Number one, we all understand. But to reach that goal, there is also a process or means or journey. Easiest way for me was to just cut off and say, like, okay, I'm not going to take any more responsibility. So my responsibility was at least to make my parents happy, because they put me through an education, they brought me up, and they had a certain kind of expectation of me. And I also was basically confused. I just went into this God realization, self realization aspect, because I thought it sounded fancy and I didn't want to take any responsibility. So I think I thought this particular example, where then I decided, you know what, I should be part of society. I should go through the experience of life. And in the background, I can still keep working on my spirituality. So today I can say that, it actually worked. This was the right decision that I took. Instead of saying, no, I'm not going to work. I'm just going to join a mission and become a
We
Kama?
lost you, Kama.
Yeah.
Vairagya.
Yes.
Yeah, we lost you for a bit. So I think
Yes.
what your case study example is for page number 47, last last line literally. Detachment should not be allowed to form any nucleus upon which the ego could fasten itself, and at the same time, it should not be an expression of one's inability to cope with the storm and stress of worldly life. But I'm still not able to
Right.
understand. I still don't see a parallel to where we were struggling with in this, which is although the process does destroy the positive sanskaras, it results in the formation of negative sanskaras. But I'm holding that question. Let's hope he answers that better below. Shall we do that, Vipul? Shall we see if he
Yeah, later
understands
maybe.
better?
It's all right. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
later
okay.
maybe. Yeah, it's all right.
Yeah.
Jai Baba.
General, thank you. Thought has to be made use. Thought has to be made use of in order to overcome the limitations set up by its own movement. But when this is done, it has itself to be given up. This amounts to the process of going beyond the mind, and this becomes possible through non-identification with the mind or its desires. To look objectively upon the body as well as all thoughts and lower impulses is to get established in blissful detachment and to negate all sanskaras. This means freeing the soul from its self imposed illusions like I am the body, I am the mind, or I am desire, and gaining ground toward the enlightened stage of I am God, Anal Haq, or Aham Brahmasmi. Okay, so that's the end of this topic. So he does not explain this further. So I think let's reflect and come back with our thoughts the next time on last but one para of this chapter, right? Negative samskaras must also disappear before enlightenment. One way of understanding it is what Mamaji said, which is the nature of sanskaras having to be expressed in opposites. So we have to express the positive with the negative and finish it. And then the specific reference here is the fact that a positive, the theory of negation, the asceticism, renunciation, and fasting and attempts like that create unwinding of the positive samskara, but leaves behind a negative samskara. So let's think about that a little bit and come back. Meanwhile, now that Kama is back, we had a question.
And Ravi is
on-
also back.
Yeah, I see him. Hi, Ravi. How are you?
Uh,
With ego, without
Jai
ego.
Baba.
Ravi, with ego, without ego.
Well, I've been doing a lot of positive things, so tonight I had to make some negative sanskaras. So that's why I was there. Playing
A
cards,
glass of wine. A glass of
playing
wine.
Watch day.
poker with my good
Poker.
old
Wow.
friends.
The life itself is a poker game. Don't take the chips seriously or the cards. As long as you do that, you're winning.
Yeah.
Can
Anyway,
we,
so
okay. Can we have any summary on this whole chapter?
we can try that. Before that, I'll go to Ashok's. The question that you brought up on Vipassana and then Ashok. On the thought, Kama, now that you're back, Mama had a question on the fact that you approach detachment by taking a thought and then not thinking or thinking in the right, indulging in the right way in that thought, so that it does not create sanskara. So, can you tell us some more based on your experience with Vipassana? Mama?
Kama is.
Yeah, I think he's not there, or he's there but not there. I think.
Yes.
Hold on. Okay.
Okay.
Oh, there he
Yeah,
is.
yeah. Jibab. So, hey, Karthik, can you quickly again repeat the question, please? Sorry.
Yeah, I don't even know if I'm putting it in the right way because it was Mama's question. The question is, how would you contrast the handling of thoughts and the sanskaras at the thought level with what you learned in Vipassana, which you keep alluding to?
Good question. Good question. I think that, most human beings, as we wake up, the first thing is our thought process. Thinking is going on all the time, hypothetically speaking, during the waking state. So the 80-20 rule of life is 20% of thoughts converted to words and 20% of words converted to deed. Now, thoughts, as we said, is like mosquitoes. You can't stop your thoughts. What you learn from Vipassana is that you observe. You observe your thoughts like waves. You don't try to control it, because when you start trying to control it, then Newton's third law of motion, action begets reaction, happens. So the thought, as we know, is an imprint or impression. So every thought, good or bad, creates a impression or imprint. Okay? Somebody has to
Yeah,
mute,
Ravi, you're the
please.
mute. Yeah, go ahead. I
So,
muted.
so the point here is that, first of all, when we look at the technical word sanskara, we know sanskara means imprint or impressions. So what do you mean by imprint or impression? So in this context of our discussion, I always use the word action in three ways: action of thoughts, action of words, action of deeds, thinking, speaking, doing. So the three different aspects of action creates three different types of sanskaras. So thoughts are creating weak sanskaras, and we know words are creating strong, and deeds are creating powerful. Now the question is, the most difficult is thoughts, because when you have a bad thought, you can at least stop yourself from actually expressing it or actually doing the act. Okay, like I want to smoke a cigarette, but I don't do it. I say, like, you know what, it's not good for me, so I stop there. but the urge will be there because of past impressions. So that is a weak sanskara. The thoughts will keep happening, as we know, even till the mental level. Because as we know, in the involution state, in the fifth plane is about thoughts, and sixth plane is about feelings, and there is still duality there. So duality means good or bad, good and bad. So in Vipassana, what you do is basically when you're sitting, you are asked to observe your thoughts because you have closed your eyes and you are also focused on your breathing. Because most people, most of us are technically 100% of normal human beings, ordinary human beings, we are not aware of our breathing because it is going on in the background, unconsciously. But the mind is basically making us focus on our thoughts. And then depending on the sanskara, we either emote those thoughts or we actually do the deed. That is why when an ascetic has this, he's able to so in the Vipassana practice, you are forced to sit down and start focusing on your and simultaneously also observe your because the first thing that happens to a waking mind is thought. Now this is where what happens, all the sanskaras from the subconscious will start attacking you because the mind is not used to this kind of process where suddenly the individual has started becoming aware of his thoughts and he's starting to not control it but becoming aware of it. And the mind's nature is to keep separativeness, whereas when you become aware, you are actually trying to dissolve this activity of individualism or separativeness because you understand the big picture. Everything is there is no equality, superiority, or inferiority. There is only unity of nature, unity in diversity. So I think to answer the question about sanskaras and vipassana and thoughts. So thoughts create weak sanskaras, which you can't prevent. You can only observe. And by the process of observation, you start to become much more self-aware. And that's where one of the postulates in dissolving sanskaras, the 5 or 6 of them that is given in this chapter, I think will help in erasing those sanskaras and whatever. Okay, Bob.
Mama, any follow-on question?
Actually, when you are doing Vipassana, you keep observing what the thought process comes to your mind. Okay, there is one thought process coming in our mind. I observe it. Then what do I do with that? I stop that thought or I
No, you
say
don't stop.
explore.
You let it go.
Okay.
You let it go. You let it go. You basically let it go because remember the first most important universal law of nature. See, the whole ball game, if you look at discourses and God speaks clearly tells us that this whole divine game, divine script is already designed even before the avatar comes into, creation, each time he comes with a divine script. Similarly, if we believe in the reincarnation part, before we are born and take a human form, there is already a big picture script which we come with. Because the whole purpose of being born is final goal is God realization. But before you reach God realization, you have to deal with different kinds of sanskaras. The reason we have multiple births is, Baba has clearly said in discourses, that each time you are working on different aspects of your sanskaras. Okay? Let's say we don't have the grace of a guru, you're doing it by yourself, by trial and error. So when you're doing Vipassana, actually, let me give you the final thing. The Vipassana meditation actually wants you to do a complete body scanning, top down. So you actually break your body into multiple parts and you close your eyes and focus on each part of the body and see what is the sensation you get because we are influenced by the gross sensations, the 5 physical senses: touch, taste, sound, smell, sight. Now, when you close your eyes, sensation of sight is gone. Like then, the only thing is one is hearing sound, and the other part is you're smelling. You're sitting in one place. That's fine. Now, taste, of course, you're not eating anything. You're just swallowing your saliva or whatever. Touch, of course, you're by yourself. So the only thing you're dealing at that time is the mental sensation of thought. So in Vipassana, what you learn is there are 5 physical sensations that you're dealing with in the waking state and 1 mental sensation of thought. So when you're sitting and meditating, when you close your eyes and you become aware of your breath, so you're actually smelling, you're actually becoming aware of your breath, which is called anapana. Anapana means observing the sensation of your breath, the inhalation and exhalation. And in the meanwhile, simultaneously, you're observing your thoughts. So you don't try to control, you don't try to make any opinion. Imagine sitting on the beach and watching the waves come. You're not controlling the waves. Imagine each wave like a thought for which you don't have control, you're only observing it. Some are large waves, some are small waves. So that is the analogy you use here because the thoughts are just coming from the subconscious. You have nothing to do with it. So the best thing to do is to not react or try to make a judgment. You're just asked to observe. You're watching a cricket match. You shouldn't start observing, Are Kohli aisa khelna tha, waisa khelna tha. Just observe the match. Just observe it without any bias. So that is the analogy you should use. Jai Baba.
Thank you. One thing which comes to my mind here is in our own philosophy or Hindu philosophy, we have a process known as Chitta Shuddhi. So Ravi is also probably aware of all these things. So this is supposed to be a bubbles coming out when you sit, say, alone and do not think of anything else. Still, the thought process will be coming up onto the surface as bubbles on an ocean, and they will dissipate if you do not disturb them. So that is the concept, and that is known as Chitta Shuddhi. So ultimately, if every bubble which is coming from the depths by a disturbance in the depth in the mind uh, comes out and then gets stilled up, then you are say clear about your mind is becoming vacant. That is one way of looking at it. Maybe Vipassana is I can equate these two together. Anyway, we have digressed on
See,
this. Yes, Kama,
no,
go ahead.
but Vipassana is very scientific. Yeah, Vipassana is very scientific. See, you have to remember that you should not say that I want to still my mind. To reach stillness of mind, you have to first go through the process of awareness of thoughts, not control. See, what is happening in meditation, this is the wrong notion about meditation practices. Meditation practice is about concentration and meditation. There is a chapter there where Baba describes the difference between concentration and meditation. Now, in my understanding of meditation, I say that real meditation is as soon as you wake up in the morning till the time you go to sleep, you become aware 100% to everything you do with complete focus and concentration. The technique of meditation, whether you do Kriya Yoga, whether you do Pranayama, whether you chant the Gayatri Mantra, whether you do Tantra, whatever, that is just a tool or technique. But the reality of the matter is, can you bring that tool or technique where you experience what you experience in your day to day life? So I don't think you can ever control your mind. You can only become aware of your thoughts. And once you start becoming aware, the thoughts will start to become much more stiller. Many people say that I find it very difficult to concentrate and sit and meditate. Wrong. We are only asking you to sit for 2 minutes every hour and observe your thoughts. It's going to be difficult. But the more you practice and become aware of it scientifically speaking and understand the concept of sanskaras, then practice makes it perfect. So I think the notion is wrong to say I want to still my mind. No, you have to observe. That's the key part. Okay, Bob.
Jai Baba.
Thank
So
you.
I was
I
just
think.
okay.
Go ahead. Complete what you're saying.
We need to think of this chapter and then think of what is the summary. What is that Baba is giving us as a summary of this chapter?
Yeah, so we are
So
almost
that can
out
be
of
the
time.
homework. Okay.
Yeah, so we're out of time. So before that, I wanted to say exactly something on those lines. So I think given what we learned from the quiz exercise that Ravi did for us yesterday, we should do that at the end of every chapter going forward, and also catch up with the quizzes for the chapters that we have not done, right? So obviously it's taking quite a bit of time. It's taking us half an hour to an hour, but it's time well spent. So I think let's do let's give a week gap between the reading and the quiz. So if we finish a chapter this week, let's do the quiz the next week. That gives us time to read, reflect, listen to the audio multiple times, ask questions, interact on Telegram, and clarify doubts if we have, and then take the quiz. And also, for the person who's assigned to make the questions, he has until Saturday morning to actually put the questions together. The academic board has time till then, right? So I think that's something we'll try for this week and for this chapter. So given recency and the fact that this is in mind, let's take this chapter for Saturday morning, and I have the questions ready. And whom should I? Somebody should be. Sherry has already done a chapter. So any volunteers for helping the board with questions?
Karthik, I think if everyone can contribute, that would be great. At least
It's only going to be going to be a lot of effort in collation, right? That's what I was thinking about. If everybody does it, and everybody doing it always ends up with nobody doing it. That's my problem. That's the second problem.
Well, that's okay. If nobody does it, that's fine. If they have time, they can always provide and send me questions, and I will compile. If there are repetitions of the questions, I'll make it into one question.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So let's see how that goes. So anybody can give questions to Ravi and Mama this week, and they will summarize, finalize the questions. And actually, if we can even send the questions before Saturday, before the meeting, we can be prepared for it as well. For those who have time before the call.
I have already formulated some questions for this chapter last week.
Awesome.
This formation of samskaras. And whoever gives me, we can do that next Saturday.
Okay. And I'm also thinking as to where to put these questions up, apart from just typing them out on PPT. Is there a way to put them in some form where it's...
I'm making in the Word document, Karthik.
Okay.
And once I make it in the Word document, I'm just copying them to PPT.
Okay, so stick to Word doc. Don't bother about PPT, because I might give you something more better. So we'll actually create I mean, pardon me, we'll use another tool, but it'll be useful because people can, anybody can participate in those quizzes with their email ID. So that's what I'm thinking. But let me do some research in the first before Monday, Tuesday, so that we have enough time.
Yeah.
Okay. So thank you, everybody. With that, we'll wrap up today's session and continue next Saturday. Have a great week ahead. Avatar Meher Baba ki jai.
Jai Baba.
Jai Baba. Jai Baba. And I thank everybody for the good wishes for my birthday. Thank you. And sorry I was not able to come in after 9. There were a lot of phone calls. And
have a Baba-ful year.
Happy birthday.
Ashok.
When was it?
Happy birthday.
Yesterday.
Yesterday. Okay. Jai Baba.
Jai Baba. Happy birthday, Mamaji, and Jai Baba.
Jai Baba.
Jai Baba.
The birthday was Ashok, by the way.
Yeah. Jai Baba.
Take care. Bye.
Jai Baba.